Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone in the chamber and at home watching on live stream. My name is Tom Campbell, and I'm Deputy Mayor of Invercargill City. We have Councillor Pottinger on Zoom. We also have Linda Clark on Zoom of Denton's Law, who acted as independent investigator. Also in the room, we have Bruce Robertson, the independent chair of Audit and Risk, and also, of course, Invercargill City Council. We have an apology from Councillor Ludlow, so will someone move that we accept that apology? Thank you, Leslie, and seconded by Trish. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Does anyone have a conflict of interest they wish to declare, other than the obvious interest that we all share through our association with the Mayor? And Councillor Pottinger?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's not a conflict, but a perception of bias. So I would like to read a statement, please. I wish to acknowledge my comments to the media regarding today's meeting subject, and that these comments have been based on the material contained within the meeting agenda. And in doing so, I wish to also acknowledge that as a City Councillor attending today's meeting, I am required to retain an open mind to any new information or material that may be subsequently presented. So thank you, Chair, that is all.
Thank you for that declaration, Councillor. This is an extraordinary meeting of Council called to consider a code of conduct complaint made against Mayor Clark, and that is the only matter on today's agenda. This is an unpleasant part of the role of Council, but nevertheless it is part of our job pardon me, to consider whether a member has breached a code of conduct which was adopted by the Council at the beginning of this triennium in 2022. At this stage, I do want to thank those members of the public who agreed to be interviewed as part of the independent investigation. There is considerable public interest in this meeting, and I know that there will be people watching who don't know the rules, if I may put it like that. So just to be clear, that this meeting will be conducted in accordance with the usual Council standing orders, as well as the Code of Conduct, both of which can be found on the ICC website for those who wish to look. For guidance in this matter, Council has received reports from the independent chair of Audit and Risk, Bruce Robertson, who's with us, and also from an independent investigator, Linda, who's also with us. All of those reports, as well as the original letter of complaint, have been included with the public agenda. However, note that those reports are for the guidance of Council and not for its instruction. The final decision is for us as councillors to make. So there are three things that Council need to decide today. Firstly, does a complaint fall within the scope of the Code of Conduct? Secondly, does it constitute a material breach of the Code of Conduct? And thirdly, what penalty should be applied, if any? So now I'm going to ask Nobby, the Mayor, Your Worship, do you wish to make an opening statement?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. I've read the report. I believe it's overly harsh, but I accept the outcome. On reflection, I have several reflections. Over 4 years as Deputy Mayor and now as Mayor, I've spoken at over 300 meetings. A third of those are public meetings. I accept that on 2 occasions, one being the subject to this complaint, I did not perform well. I acknowledge to my colleagues that this code of conduct reflects from all the good work done around the city and the work that's still in progress. I have already apologised in writing to the complainant. I do not accept that the public complaint that is outside the scope of this code of conduct should be dealt with in this way. I will take an opportunity at a later date to seek a review of this process, as it is, in my view, setting a dangerous precedent for elected members. I've taken steps to ensure that there is no repeating concerns, and those steps are around the media access to myself and also around public speaking. I find it ironical that part of the complaint against me from the association was around a comment I made around volunteers and how they are not supported adequately. Yet on last Saturday's TV1 News, the complainant and some of his members were publicly raising those identical concerns. For those who have been publicly sought my resignation, I need to declare that I will not be resigning. I will continue to front foot both the city projects, economic development for the region, and to lead this council. I will now withdraw from the meeting to allow my colleagues to decide on the outcome of this report without my presence. And as a final note, I will not be making any further media comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I mentioned before that we as council have to determine three things: whether this complaint falls within the scope of the Code of Conduct, whether it is a material breach, and whether a penalty should be applied. These are sequential questions. Obviously, if considered not within scope, then that would be the end of the matter. Similarly, if we determined it was within scope but was not a material breach, then that would be the end of the matter. If council decides yes to the first two questions, then the mayor is recorded to have breached the Code of Conduct. Council must then decide whether any further penalty is required as described in paragraph 16.1 of the Code. For example, if an apology has already been tendered, or if the mayor has already taken steps to avoid it happening again, then it is open to council to decide whether that is a satisfactory resolution of the matter, or whether further action is required. Finally, in these opening comments, I want to remind council that we are here to discuss a specific Code of Conduct complaint raised by the UFBA. And we do not have any papers in front of us regarding any other matter or event. So I will chair quite tightly if a member drifts on to unrelated events.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
The first matter you allude to, the scope of the Code of Conduct. We have very clear advice that on the entirety of the Code of Conduct, this matter clearly falls within the scope. I do not see that part of today is to detract ourselves on the question of the scope of the code for any length of time at all. It is completely clear that the entirety of the Code of Conduct means that this complaint falls within the code. If there is any intention from any councillor to raise the issue in the future of whether a future Code of Conduct should be differently worded, that is for a different meeting. Today we have a very clear and legal opinion that this matter is within scope, and I see no reason why this council should spend any time on the matter of scope when there is such clear legal advice on the question, not only from the independent investigator, but backed by reference to the Local Government Act itself and the opinion of the Attorney General.
So may I ask Councillor Soper if you wish to move that we accept that it does fall within the scope?
I would move that this falls within the scope,
Okay,
yes.
is there a seconder for that, Trish?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? And if not, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So we never spent very long on it, Councillor.
Thank you.
Secondly, the question of whether this should be considered a material breach, and that's a matter that I'm going to open for discussion. So does somebody want to start? Question is it a material breach?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Pottinger wants to talk.
Okay. Councillor Pottinger.
Again, on the same lines as Councillor Soper, we have legal advice that tells us this is a material breach. And for us, as non-legal people, to give our own views and try and dismiss or change this view, I don't think we are capable of doing that. Sorry, that question has already been answered. So again, for council to go out on a limb and by the weight of numbers overturn a very firm and convincing legal opinion, I think council exposes itself.
So,
Thank you.
Councillor Leslie, I think you were, Councillor Soper, you want to comment?
Yes, I had my hand raised.
Okay. I think that for me the difference with this one is that whereas the first one is a clear legal point, which I actually agree with, the point that Councillor Soper made the first time, the word material, of course, is a subjective word. And in fact, I don't think the word material was actually used in Linda's report. She described it as a breach. So I'm happy, either councillors, if you wish to move that we accept it's a material breach, and we can have discussion after that. But I think it is a little bit different. The word material, because it's subjective, I think changes the position a little. So Ria.
I'd like to move that we consider that the Mayor has breached the Code of Conduct and it falls within the material of breach inside of the Code of Conduct. And also to Ms Clark, that's online on Zoom, she has referred to the evidence that she's supplied to us to make determinations or decisions from, where he has effectively breached the Code of Conduct and it's a material breach. There's nothing in the evidence that can argue that, in my opinion, that he didn't.
Okay, well anyway, you
I'll
moved.
second that move, Mr. Chair, and in saying that I'll take the seconder's right to add, from having read the full circumstances and the report and recommendations and the investigator's report, it is to me quite clear that there was the crossing of a line of our Code of Conduct repeatedly in this particular matter, that it was an egregious matter, and that it is clearly a material breach of more than one clause of our Code of Conduct. So I am definitely seconding that we accept that this is a material breach.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'll put the motion that this constituted a material breach of the code. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Against? Carried. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Pottinger, there's a sort of 1 second delay so that you came in. It sounded like... anyway, okay, thank you. So then we turn to the question of penalty. So anyway, having resolved yes to the first two questions, the Mayor is found to have breached the code. So now we have to turn to the question of penalty, noting that it is open to Council under paragraph 16.1 to determine whether the fact the apology already given by the Mayor has already met the recommendation of the independent investigator, and that would conclude the matter. So in this case, I'll leave it open to discussion. Who wants to start? I mean, I think this is such an important point. I would really like to hear from every councillor on this point. I mean, clearly it is a matter of debate, so therefore I would like to hear that debate take place. So it's a matter of what the penalty should be. Who's going to speak first? Yes, Ria.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd actually like to further question, if I may, Linda Clark. With the evidence that she's supplied to us for our consideration, I note on page 26 that the Mayor has made an apology to the CEO of the UFBA, and this was dated on the 7th of June. And I was wondering, and through this process before we received this information publicly, had there been any further discussion from the CEO to the investigator about this apology?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I see my role as quite limited in the sense that I had terms of reference to investigate the allegations, and I interviewed a range of individuals, including the Chief Executive and the President of the UFBA as part of that. As you'll know from my report, the person who wrote the complaint didn't actually attend, so while I interviewed him, that was more to do with the process, but he wasn't a witness to any of this. And then I saw my role as to complete the report and hand it back to council, excuse me, which I did through Mr. Cameron. And I don't see the role of the investigator as having any ongoing role with any of the participants. It was clear, and I noted this in the report, that the mayor's initial position as regards this investigation was that he was not going to contribute or participate in the process, and so he was asked, he was given the opportunity to be interviewed, which he declined, and then I gave him the opportunity to provide a written statement, which he initially declined, and then when I went back to him with the draft report, as you would expect, so that he had an opportunity to see it and correct it, it was at that point that he chose to engage in the process. And once he had engaged, he indicated to me that he did intend to apologise. I think by that stage he may well have already apologised or sent a letter to the UFBA. He also at that stage asked me for a contact with the person who I've identified as Ms. X in the report. I indicated to him that it wasn't appropriate for me to be a conduit between him and her, and I left that, again, raised that with council and left that with council, so that if the mayor followed, and I kind of completed that loop, told the mayor that's what I'd done, so if the mayor wanted to contact her, he needed to do that or get her contact details through council. And that's kind of where I left it.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Ria, was your question whether there had been any response to the letter?
My question was, as this material was being compliant for us to consider as evidence in the Code of Conduct, had this apology, one, been accepted by the the United Firefighters Brigades Association, or had they gone through Ms. Clark to accept that apology and make any commentary? I guess supplementary to that, Mr. Chair, is to ask our staff, has there been do we know, has this apology been formally accepted, or has it just simply been left without any
Ria,
commentary?
I actually asked that question this morning. There has been no response from the
Okay.
Fire Brigade.
Okay.
Yes, Trish.
My comment about this is, I'd have to say, first of all, I'm extremely disappointed that we're put in this position. I think it shows a lack of judgment, and I have indicated that to the Mayor myself, because I feel that he's let us down. In saying that, we all make mistakes from time to time, and I believe that there's a way forward that we could work. I think there perhaps could be some conditions around speaking in public, or taking a position where you are being asked to represent the council and acknowledge the work that people have done, both of which seem to have been disappointing in this situation. So there's definitely errors of judgment, and I definitely believe that we can put some kind of conditions around future practice.
Thank you. Leslie, I'm sorry I missed you before.
That's fine, Mr Chair, thank you. My answer would be no, that the apology is not sufficient. It is very clear from the investigation that the egregious behaviour included in particular an attack on the individual Ms X, and that was a repeated set of comments, both at the social function and in the speech. The apology letter we have seen, and it is in today's paper, would not, in my mind, at all meet the requirements of an apology to the United Fire Brigades and to Ms X at all. I realise that Ms X is a contractor with the United Fire Brigades, but it is very clear that the references to her in particular were prolonged, upsetting and extremely, I would have to say that I feel shocked and somewhat appalled at having read the material, and that a personal apology to her would be an absolute requirement in this matter. I also agree that there are other penalties available to us as a councillor that we have to consider in this place.
Leslie, I'll just
And there
make-
are a range of those, but certainly the apology letter that we have seen and that I have read in today's papers is not, I would say, a sufficient apology for the behaviour that has been described. And I have to emphasise, described almost unanimously by those interviewed by the investigator.
On the first point about apology to Miss X, my understanding is that the mayor did try to contact her, but was told by various people who he tried to get through that he should simply apologise to the fire brigade and pass that, and have them pass that on. So he was told that. He did try, as I understand it, to apologise directly to Miss X. So I've been told.
I would have thought, as a supplement to that, that it would have been entirely inappropriate for the mayor to have approached the person in question at all, but that an apology letter through the United Fire Brigades to her in particular, rather than a general apology letter, which is what we have seen today, would have been, in my mind, a bottom line necessity.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Steve next. Steve, you're on.
Yeah. I've just written down a few notes. Thanks, Chair. Today I just wanted to acknowledge it's a tough day. It's tough being here. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge that the feelings of all those involved within this process are at the forefront of my mind. I've struggled with how to approach this, but I've leaned into my core beliefs around the role that we all have as elected officials. And I keep coming back to leadership, to honour, and to the duty that we have to our city and to our ratepayer. My great-granddad once sat in a seat around the council chamber and was mayor of this city, and I know the incredible pride that generations since have felt in that. That has informed my belief that a seat around this table is not a right, it is a privilege. It should not be expected or seen as something that we are entitled to. It is an honour, first and foremost, and should be held very carefully. Today for me is less about one person, it's about the standard that each of us around this table set for ourselves, for each other, and the expectations of our community. Those standards should never be, I acknowledge, so high that we can't make mistakes and grow from those mistakes. But I believe the Mayor's behaviour that brings us here today, while acting explicitly in the role of Mayor, has fallen short of the honour of that role. When in public, a Mayor represents their diverse community, and I'm concerned that the strength of our Mayor's personal views have impacted his ability to deliver the representative part of his role. I believe the Mayor's behaviour has cast a negative shadow on not just how our city sees this group around this table, but on how the nation sees our city. And I have concerns around further damage that may be done to our reputation as a welcoming and inclusive community, to the narrative of who we are as a community, and to future opportunities that lay in front of us. I believe allowing the Mayor to continue in his current capacity would be an endorsement of repeated behaviour. So the question I've asked myself is, when is enough enough? Leadership is tough, and I credit our Mayor truly for the strong leadership he has demonstrated in many areas in his role. For that, he absolutely has my respect. But great leadership for me is knowing when to step out in front. It's knowing when to push from behind, when to cheer from the sidelines, but maybe most importantly, when to step aside. When I put my hand up for a seat at this table, I said I would listen. I said that I would do my best to represent my community, and I committed to make the decision that I believed was right, even when that decision was brutally hard. With that, I'm urging the Mayor to consider whether he is medically or otherwise fit for the role at this time, and to consider handing in his resignation.
Thank you, Steve. So, thank you. So, Evelyn.
E te koro matua tuarua, he rā pauri tēnei. This is a truly sad day. I came here just over 2 years ago. No, sorry, nearly 3 years ago. Along with my colleague Pania as the first mana whenua reps to sit at this table, representing Ngāi Tahu at this table. We signed the same codes of conduct that are asked of every other member of this table. I come as a person of faith, as a parent, as a grandmother. I have 2 female mokopuna, I have 1 male. And the one I'm going to speak about first is the male one. This is the message I got from him this morning. I was 17 when I joined Fire and Emergency New Zealand. He was a volunteer at 17. I found the experience I gathered from my time as a volunteer contributed towards me achieving my goals, firstly as an ambulance officer and now crewman for Air Ambulance Organisation. And he goes on to talk about the experiences that he had. He also talks about the negative impact it can have on mental health and the need for support for things like PTSD. He made that commitment at 17, and as part of what was said in the remarks made by a koromatua at that conference, at that event, volunteers such as my mokopuna were disrespected. But I'm also the proud taua of 2 stunning young women, and I think about how disrespectful young women were spoken about during the same thing, according to the complaint and the people who heard those complaints. Is that what we are comfortable hearing about, spoken by the leader of our city, about people performing their functions on behalf of another organisation, that they had showed honour to him by inviting him, that they invited he and his partner to participate. They sat him at the top table and offered him a chance to speak. But this was the opportunity that he chose to use to be disrespectful. Sadly, I didn't find the fact that he spoke in that way particularly surprising. I found it deeply distressing, wildly inappropriate, but not surprising, because this is part of a pattern.
Point of order, Pat.
Sorry, I accept. Thank you. But if we are to be true to ourselves, we have to ask ourselves, is this something that we are prepared to accept? That an apology that does not apologise to the harm done to us as a table, to us as a city, to our staff, to those who have had to adjudicate on this, all of whom have been affected by this, means that it's not, to me, a complete apology. For somebody to expect to receive mana, to be treated with mana, to be invited to prestigious events, to be sat at top tables, to be asked to speak, means that you actually have to demonstrate that mana in return. You have to act with true pono, with truth, with mana, with dignity, and show mana and dignity and respect to those whom you represent, either as an employer or as a colleague or as the leader of the city. I too do not find that in this instance our koro matua has acted in the best traditions of what we should expect. I have known many, many mayors, because I've worked here for a long time and I've lived a fair amount of time as well. I have never felt, as I do, how embarrassed I was to be away this week and everybody reading what they read in the paper. But my own people asked me to come home from a meeting that was their meeting, that I was there for, to be here today, to make sure that you understand that we feel this shame quite deeply. We feel this distress quite truly, and that we urge the koro matua to show us the respect of looking into his heart and accepting that he perhaps is not in the right place, in the right physical health or state of mind to continue to lead this city and to stand aside. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn, and thank you for coming back. Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, look, equally I'm like the others that have spoken before me, this is a difficult and challenging time. This has had an impact on our community, which as a proud Southlander really has an impact on me. I think the Mayor has made a significant error of judgment in, what's happened. I also know that he's genuinely remorseful, and he's wearing it heavy. So I agree with Councillor Soper's proposal that a formal letter should be written to Ms X as an apology. I think that's the least we could do for the obvious very difficult position that she's been put in as a father of 3 daughters, and I listened to what Evelyn's talked about. That bears heavy on my heart for her and her family, so I feel for her. I question in my own mind about the Mayor's health. We're very aware of what he's been through, and what duty of care we should have taken with hindsight around his capacity or capability to return to work when he did. And I think that's something that we need to take account of, in terms of how we look after people in these roles, these very public roles. Are they able and well and fit enough to be able to undertake the duties which they need to discharge? And as a Mayor, those duties are significant, as we know now. So, that's my view on it. I think the community is wearing this very heavily, and it's really real shame. I think we're feeling it very heavily, and I know the Mayor is as well. And so, we've got to try and find a way through this to recover as a city and talk about all the good things that are in our city and make it the things that have happened most recently, which is, we know of at Te Wai, so that's
So
my-
Grant, you've spoken about the need for an additional apology,
Yeah.
more explicit apology to Miss X.
Yes,
And you've spoken about concern about the Mayor's health
yes,
and the question of whether we discharged our duty of care to him when he came back. And I guess one thing that I would remind members is that Council granted the Mayor 3 months leave because of his
yeah,
condition. He came back a month early, and he came back specifically because he wanted to attend a Coopers Creek meeting, because he wanted to advocate for that, and that was why he came back. And there's a question about the wisdom around that and so forth, and I'm not meaning that as any kind of excuse for, but I think, your point about the duty of care is probably
yeah.
an interesting one. So were you going to go into say anything, Grant, about an appropriate penalty, or?
So how, you'll hear everyone speak, obviously, and then we'll come to a conclusion by way of a motion? Is that what you're thinking?
But the sort of thing, I mean, have you?
Oh, like I do believe the Mayor's genuine and remorseful, and he who hasn't sinned throw the first stone, in my view. So, while our community is feeling this, I think we should look at ways in which we can enable the Mayor to sort of, well, firstly, probably work through in a little bit to what Evelyn said, how he's feeling about continuing on. Don't know if we've actually asked him about that and, the pressure and strain he's under, firstly, and then work through a process of that.
Okay, thank you, Barry.
Yeah, I'm like everyone else. I'm very disappointed in from the Mayor's comments. I certainly think he come back to work too early, and he's already mentioned in his statement that he had a bit of brain fade. He has apologised, and I'm just wondering whether us as a council should be sending an apology as well to the Miss X. And my advice would be to the Mayor that from any other time that he speaks publicly, like when we did our one on the youth crime, that he wrote down a statement and read it off instead of just coming out of his head. So that would be my advice to him. But I know he's very regretful about the whole thing.
Say that sentence again, Barry. Into the mic.
Pardon?
Say that sentence again into the microphone. I couldn't.
Oh,
Just
sorry.
the last sentence.
Yeah. I know he's very regretful
Okay.
because I've talked to him about it.
Thank you. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to keep this brief because a lot of what I was going to say has really already been said, but leaders by definition, they're inspirational. We all set the standard of which we look up to, and they raise the bar, and as we all aspire to match them. And there's no doubt that Nobby's work ethic is inspirational. He's task focused and he drives things through. However, his ageist, sexist and racist behaviour has created a void where that inspiration should be. And I believe that undermines the good work that we achieve for our city and its constituents. I respect that he is regretful, I really do. My heart genuinely goes out to him. I know he will be feeling this. The whole community is feeling it. But this instance is just the first instance that's actually made it to our table. It is the latest chapter of a series of national embarrassment. I am appalled by the unanimous comments, but I am simply not surprised. I have heard Nobby speak like this with my own ears. I'm actually sick of having to justify myself to my colleagues right across the nation. I'm sick of feeling humiliated, and I'm sick of having to apologise on his behalf. We owe it to ourselves and future generations to set a standard of conduct that reflects the best of who we are as a community, and the actions that we take today will shape the future of Invercargill. Ensuring that our leaders not only exceed, but raise the bar for the expectations for the future. The public's trust in their elected representatives is crucial. Processes like the Code of Conduct exist for this reason. That's why we're here. The Mayor is democratically elected. We, around this council table, no matter what we do, could never force him to take a period of absence, but we can ask him to look in the mirror and ask himself if he will impose and hold himself to the same behavioural standards as he does to everybody else around this table and has to other members this term. Will he step down in the way that he has forced others to step down for behavioural issues such as this? The role of a mayor is an honour and a privilege, as each councillor weighs their decision today. I join Steve in urging the mayor to consider whether he is currently fit, medically or otherwise, to uphold that honour. Whatever the outcome, we know that our wives, our children, our daughters, the wider community, all of our whānau will be watching us, looking at each individual person here around this table and asking whether or not that aligns with their morals, their values, and which side of the fence that you are on. Will you let this slide? The standard of behaviour that you walk past is the standard of behaviour that you accept. Ask yourself that question.
Thank you, Alex. So then we have. Okay, you did too. Ria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I couldn't have said it so eloquently myself. I'm a mother. I'd never want my daughter to be treated in the way that the Mayor imposed on her at a public function. I look at the firefighters and I look at the 11,832 volunteers that go around this country and look after our members that have been hurt by drunk drivers, where they cut our family out of the cars and deal with their deaths on a day-to-day, sadly a day-to-day incidents. When I look at the apology the Mayor has given, I am sad to say that I don't believe it when I read it. It's by far not good enough. It doesn't even go to the measure of causing an individual such trauma that she wished the ground would open up and swallow her. That is deep humiliation in front of her peers. This is how she makes her income. She is a businesswoman that deserved a hell of a lot more respect than she was given. To imply that she was having an affair with the president is one of the most horrific things that a female professional can be accused of because of the way she looks or where she comes from in this country. The Mayor failed miserably in his not being able to read the room. He failed in his objectiveness of how he should behave as a mayor on this occasion and as we've heard other times. It has gone on record just yesterday that if the majority of his colleagues felt that he should resign, then he will. That has been said. So when I'm sitting here looking at the evidence, I cannot justifiably accept that we need to apologise because he came back to work too early, because we did question that, Councillor Barry Stewart. Councillor Ludlow asked if we needed to seek a medical certificate and we got fobbed off with that. In the media, I got told to mind my own business, was I a doctor? When I was concerned about him coming back too early, I was concerned about this very behaviour occurring. I don't accept that a bypass operation can be excused for bad manners, poor behaviour, I can't say the words, sorry, treating members of our public in such a disrespectful way. You cannot blame that on heart surgery. So the question is that I'd like to pose, and hopefully either Ms. Clark can answer or our advisors here, or officials or staff. The Mayor has made a claim that he has a medical incapacity that's influenced the event under discussion, and that, for my benefit or anyone else in this room, should be seen with a medical evidence to suggest that what he's saying is true. It's unacceptable that we are expected to believe that his poor behaviour that was present before his heart surgery is the reason why he gets away with it again this time. I find it unacceptable that we look at how to impose a penalty on the mayor when the behaviour displayed is not new. It's not new.
Point of order. We're discussing this item.
Yep, I'm discussing it. I'm discussing the many people in that room that walked out because of that behaviour, according to the evidence in
Yeah.
front of us.
Carry
So my
on, Ria.
question-
I think the point that Trish was making was that you started to describe it as being a sort of pattern of behaviour. That was the
my apologies,
point.
sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, my apologies. Sorry, Councillor Boyle. My recommendation would be that we seek further medical evidence that supports the mayor's claims that his brain fade is due to his heart surgery, and that we can expect a 2-year impact for him not to be able to fulfill his role. And then I guess we would need to look at what support systems we put around him should he not look in the mirror and resign today. Thank you.
Thank you. Panya.
Kia ora. Okay. The conduct by the Mayor described in the allegations for me falls within serious misconduct because of the serious harm to the people of the United Fire Brigades Association and reputation of the council. Yes, people make mistakes, and I do feel his remorse. However, I believe there is an ongoing pattern of breaches, and this is why I'm sharing today. The Mayor referred to me as black privileged during the time when he was pushing for the removal and not supporting Te Reo Māori names on buildings, which my response was, I wish I was. In regards to this matter today, I have also received a number of concerns from the public, including Bluff residents on this matter. I will share the feedback received from Bluff community people who attended the Bluff distillery opening early this year. The Mayor spoke at the opening of the distillery at Ocean Beach. He left some Bluff people upset when he referred to Bluff people set in their own ways. They did not support any development and don't like change because he had spoken to someone at the Bluff supermarket. Then he went on to say Bluff needed to be tidied up, then criticised our eateries and lack of them. So I believe council elected members need to take this seriously. I support my colleagues Ms Cook, Councillor Board, Crackett and Bond's perspective. Kia ora.
Thank you. Now, I think there are two councillors we haven't heard from yet. That's Alan and Peter. Pardon? I have for Rangi either. So Rangi's got his hand up, so I'll take Rangi first.
Okay, is it my go, is it?
Yep.
Thank you. Look, I'll keep this simple, and I've been very impressed by some of the statements from my fellow council colleagues. Thank you. The Mayor, in his attendance and behaviour at the United Firefighters function, has failed to honour the most important of values, and that is respect. And in failing this, has clearly shown that he is not the person who should hold the role of leading this city. There is no apology that can repair the hurt he has caused. And therefore, I would ask this committee, through the way of a formal motion, to ask the Mayor to tender his resignation. So I'm moving that now.
Rangi, can I come back to you perhaps and get you to move it? I promise I won't take a motion from MD else in the meantime, but there are two other councillors that have still got to speak at this point, and I would like...
Look, I understand that, but the motion can sit, okay?
Okay.
The motion can sit, understanding orders that can sit, and you are dead right. Please continue.
Okay. Okay. So, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. Most has been said what I was going to say. I'm very disappointed what's happened, and I agree that with others that Nobby has overstepped the mark on this occasion. I just hope and pray that he has learnt his lesson, because deep down he's not really a bad bugger at all. Thank you.
Okay. So, Alan.
Yeah, I'd like to I think I feel very sorry and affected by what's happened with what the Mayor's done at the UFBA conference and on other occasions. But I'd just like to remind everybody that we are all just normal people here. We're members of the community. We're not created, we're not made. We represent the community, and we're from the community. So things like this unfortunately can happen, and I think, and I know for a fact that the Mayor is very remorseful what's happened, and I think he, on hindsight, he would certainly have changed things going forward, and I know that he will make any apology that's required, but I sort of also think of he's got a certain style, and because of that style, you know, this community of Invercargill, who he was elected by, is definitely moving forward and in the right direction, and except for this particular incident, and there's been a couple of others, of course, but as I say, once again, he's just a normal person, outspoken at times, perhaps doesn't think things through as well as what he should at times, but I think being what we are, I think we should allow him the chance to make amends, and I still think he's the right person for the job. Yeah.
Okay. So, I think everybody has spoken. Leslie, okay, because you're the second. Well, no, you weren't. No, you haven't seconded it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when I spoke originally, I spoke in particular about the fact that I did not believe the apology tendered was appropriate, and that there was a bottom line need to also apologise to Ms X in particular as the person targeted, but I didn't speak on the wider issue at that time. What I would now like to contribute is that we are here because there has been a serious breach of our code of conduct. The investigation and what we have read makes it absolutely clear that there was nothing fair, respectful or courteous about the conduct of the Mayor in this particular interaction, and that the complaint is entirely a valid one. In my mind, it amounts to serious misconduct. It was the crossing of a line not once, but we are informed in the report and by the witnesses who were there that it was repeated. So at the table there were attempts, we are told, to remonstrate with the opinions given. The response to that was that those people would be talked about during the speech. That is what happened. So there was an attempt to ask the Mayor to consider his conduct. That attempt led to even more egregious, outrageously bad, flagrant speaking to the entire meeting. To me, this is serious misconduct we are talking about, and I just can't see anything in it that can be seen as fairly, respectfully or courteously dealing with the many people who were present at that meeting. Unfortunately, of course, it leads the whole council to be brought into disrepute, because that is our leader, and of course all of us are therefore asked how we can work with somebody whose conduct has been quite that outstandingly bad, as I would say, egregious. To me, a serious line has been crossed. The apology gives us to understand, and I do not agree that this should necessarily ever have been written there because your health condition is no excuse. But the apology as it is written gives us to understand that we can have no confidence in the next few years that such behaviour will not be repeated, no matter what particular strictures or rules we might try to put around such behaviour recurring. That is a concern, I feel, that is quite a serious concern because it has been stated by the Mayor himself.
Yeah.
I have thought very deeply about this, and I would have to say that my feeling is that this is such a serious matter that this council does need to ask the Mayor to consider stepping aside as Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, everyone has spoken except me. As I listen to everybody speak, I mean, there are some common themes. The first one obviously being that the apology, as we have seen it, has been inadequate, and that Miss X has not been directly apologised to. I think that's what everybody has said. Several members have talked about the possibility or need, should the Mayor continue to be Mayor, the possibility of putting some kind of control around him, which avoids this sort of thing happening again. Some have gone further to suggest that the time has come when he should be asked to resign, and in fact we have a motion from Councillor Pottinger to that effect, which I will put shortly. My own perspective is a kind of mixture of all of those things. Firstly, I would agree that another apology needs to be made. Secondly, I do think that there is a need to provide some mechanism or protection that we don't find ourselves in the same situation again in a couple of months' time following another public speaking engagement. Well, one thought I had on that was that perhaps we could ask that or strongly recommend to the Mayor that he delegates all public engagements to the Deputy Mayor or to another councillor to undertake. And that would be one way of providing that protection. As to whether he should be asked to step aside, the thing that I've got that mitigates it for me is the whole question of his heart operation and this question of brain fade. Now, I would remind members that the Mayor spoke to us about that issue at the beginning of April before this complaint even surfaced. So, not in this chamber, but in the chamber next door, he told councillors that he was suffering from that problem. So it's not a kind of made up issue, he told us that. Since then, in the paper today, in the Southland Times today, there is the medical opinion of two professors, one in Auckland and one in Christchurch, which says that his behaviour could indeed have been impacted by brain fade, or whatever the medical term for that is. I think an issue for us, of course, is that his specialist advice about brain fade, which he told us about in April, that his specialist advice was that could last for 2 years. And obviously that's beyond the end of this triennium, which is obviously a concern because, again, we don't want to be here in the same situation in a couple of months' time. So that's what brings me to the thought that strongly recommended to the Mayor that he steps aside from all public engagement and asks the Deputy Mayor or another councillor to do that, would probably be where I would land. So what I will do, we have a motion from Councillor Pottinger. I'll ask if anybody will second it. And if we have a seconder, then we'll put that to the vote. If that motion fails, then I will put the motion that I have just made about asking the Mayor to stand aside from public engagements. So it's been so long ago, Rangi, since do you want to word it again? Pardon? Yeah, I mean, look, there's been a few speakers since. Do you want to word your proposed motion again?
Okay, two things. Just before I do that, am I allowed to reply to your statement?
I think what I would suggest, Councillor, is that if your motion fails and I then put that alternative motion, then you speak to it then, because we're going to a discussion phase on the second one. I think at
okay.
this at this stage you just put your original motion again, mainly because I just forget the exact words.
Oh, look, the motion was quite straightforward. The motion is that this committee of council formally requests in writing to the Mayor that he tender his resignation, and that would be as soon as possible under the circumstances.
I don't want to lead you in this, Councillor, but I just wonder whether you'd want to add the words on medical grounds at the end of that.
No, we're going to talk about that later. That opens the resignation. I'm asking for his resignation because he's failed in his role as Mayor, and in doing that, I'm asking for his resignation.
Okay, will someone second that motion?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, well, I will put the motion. All those in favour, say, well, no, let's have a show of hands. All those in favour, please put up your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I would just remind those, the people who are watching who may not know that the Mana Whenua representatives cannot actually vote. They can speak at council, but they cannot actually vote. 5. And those against the motion? 5. Against. So the motion has failed. So I propose to put the motion that I suggested again, which is, could we strongly recommend that the Mayor delegates all formal public engagements to the Deputy Mayor or to another councillor for the remainder of this triennium? And I think Trish has just seconded.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so discussion. Rangi, I will come to you first because you did ask to.
Okay, so in going down this pathway of a medical sort of step aside, then I will have to look at Schedule 7, Section 2, brackets 1 of the Local Government Act, which gives the mechanism to remove an elected person because they are incapable of holding their position. Now, by endorsing this, if you go ahead and vote this, this will then be the backing of such a request. So I don't know how many are familiar with that clause in the Local Government Act, but you all should be. And so I'm just making you very wary of this. If this succeeds, then it basically confirms that the Mayor is not capable of holding his role as designated in the Local Government Act, Section 41A. So
Peter,
yeah,
obviously, Councillor, people can have medical conditions which put them on light duties, if I can call it that, without necessarily precluding them from doing the full duties of the role.
Okay,
It
well,
happens every day.
No, sorry. I don't want to get into debate with you, but you've stated that he does not go and speak in front of functions and someone else does it or the deputy mayor does it. Sorry, that's not like duties. That's saying he is incapable of performing that role. And deep down, everyone knows why he's not capable of performing that role. So, no, look, I'm welcome for this line of debate to move. Thank you.
Okay, so anyway, we're open for discussion. Anybody else want to comment before we vote? Grant, sorry, you're...
Yeah, well, it's just in regard to the motion, whether it's appropriate to add the apology to Ms X as part
yes,
of that motion.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a second part of the motion, but yes. Anybody else want to comment? Evelyn?
I understand and I accept that should I have been allowed to vote, obviously I would have voted in the opposite direction that the outcome was, but leaving that aside, to accept that the majority of councillors do not wish to take that course of action, this to me still provides opportunity for the mayor to speak and act in ways that might undermine our code of conduct. I don't know how, apart from the public facing functions, would not preclude him being similarly outrageous in a council meeting, in a hearing, anything else like that, because as a member he's entitled to attend and say, as long as he doesn't breach the code of conduct. But then again, perhaps if he's chairing the meeting, who's going to stop him? But also the things that might be put into print. I'm uncomfortable, and I think that you've made a decision today, we have to accept and live with that. I'm not sure that this is the solution. I also, within this, do not see any apology to the public, any apology to the other people who were offended by this. And whilst I agree that Ms X was the most egregiously affected, he's the leader of our city. If he does not apologise to our citizens for this behaviour and does not cease that, then this perhaps has been a pointless exercise. So I do want to say that if we're using ill health as the reason for doing this, then there needs to be proof of that ill health. There needs to be proof that the mechanisms that you're putting around him will prevent such events occurring again. Otherwise, we are going to be back here again.
Okay, so
Sorry.
you're speaking to the motion, Evelyn. Trish, you were putting your hand up, I think.
I'd just like to say that if the situation, we've got a motion that has been lost, if a situation arises again, we would go through the process and follow the correct procedure. So what we're dealing with is what's happening here at the moment, which has been lost, and now we're just talking to the amended motion or a new motion that the Deputy Mayor has put.
Okay, any other comments? Ria?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Speaking to your motion, I'd like to remind councillors, with the evidence that we're provided from Ms Linda Clark, that there is a medical undercurrent with the Mayor, that he will be facing an impact from his surgery for up to 2 years. When we're looking at sanctioning him or giving him penalties, you are effectively removing him from the public eye. So for me, that's a vote of no confidence in the Mayor. Our public have weighted in on this as well, as you know, online. I think that this is a career-ending situation for us in terms of supporting a mayor that has claimed medical incapacity. So I would like to suggest that we hold this on the table, that we request medical clearance and further confidential medical information from his specialist, in order to then determine what we do next with this code of conduct. I think that is the most practical and fair thing to do.
So, Chair, may I just, is that, sorry, Ria, are you suggesting that in conjunction with
Correct.
motion 7, so an
Correct.
amendment to motion? Oh.
Yeah, sorry, yes. That's correct.
Okay, now here it is. Right. So, Maria, I'm still not absolutely clear, because I think what Alex suggested, you were suggesting, is actually not what you suggested. What Alex suggested, I think, was that what you were proposing became an additional item to item 7, where I think you were actually proposing to replace item 7. Is that
I'm proposing that for your motion, I spoke to your motion, I'm proposing that we sit the matter on the table and seek further medical confidential information from the Mayor's specialist in order to make sure that he is medically fit for office. And then when we come back after receiving that, we then determine what sanctions or protective measures that we'll put around the Mayor to ensure that we're not faced with this problem again.
Okay. So if the motion fails, then you can put your motion. I mean, I would just observe that I don't think MD can have any doubt, surely, that the Mayor did suffer a heart attack, did go into hospital, did have open heart surgery, did come back after 2 months, told us when he came back that he was warned that he might have brain fade, then wrote in the letter that he did suffer brain fade, and then today in the newspaper 2 professors of medicine agreeing that that indeed might be the case. So I'm just wondering just exactly what you're trying to achieve by asking for a medical certificate.
Well, he downplayed his illness effects, didn't he?
Okay, so I am going to
That's
put
quite
that
fair.
motion, and then, sorry Leslie, you can comment, but after that I will put the motion. If that motion fails, then we can put the motion that that Ria has suggested. So,
Point of
Leslie.
order.
Certainly.
Point of order.
Yeah, go ahead.
Look, I can't see the motion. Can the chair please explain or write down what his motion is, because the wording of this motion is critical when it comes to the inclusion of anything medical. So can you please tell me the motion?
So, I don't, what's number 1 to 4? Is that a different? Okay. So, number 5 notes that the Mayor has tendered an apology to the Unified Fire Brigade Association. Okay, well, there that started. 6 resolves that the following about that. Okay. So number 7, the Council requests that the Mayor delegate the attendance of all formal external events to the Deputy Mayor or to another councillor for the balance of this triennium. And number 8, that Council also requests the Mayor make a formal apology to Ms X.
Sorry, that previous one is the delegation of attending things. What is the reason for that, please? There has to be a reason why council is doing that. Can you please include that in your resolution?
Okay, that in the light of the Mayor's advice that he may suffer, since the Mayor has received medical advice that he may suffer brain fade for the next 2 years, Council requests that the Mayor delegate the attendance of all formal external events to the Deputy Mayor or another councillor for the balance of the triennium.
And that is the resolution.
Well, it's not yet until it's resolved, but that is a draft resolution.
Okay.
Any other comment for anybody? Yes, Leslie, sorry.
Thank you, Mr Chair. So my comment would be that the motion that's on the table, even with the amendment, only addresses one small part of the issue we are here discussing today, doesn't address the entirety of the matter at all, and that I would be very uncomfortable with that as the full resolution. I remind all councillors that among the possible penalties we can consider, So we have already ruled out the invitation to consider resigning. But among the other possible penalties, there is a letter of censure to the member, a request made for an apology, and while I certainly agree with the apology, the formal apology to Miss X, I also, as others have noted, note that there were other people referred to who are owed apologies, including the members of the public of Invercargill.
So do you want to...
But I'm concentrating particularly on the letter of censure to the member. I see nothing in this current motion that has been put on the table that includes, considering that this is, in my opinion, serious misconduct, that includes that we have actually sent or agreed to send as a council a formal letter of censure to the member, which makes it clear why there would then be the following action of requesting the delegation of certain parts of the responsibilities and even the requesting of the further apologies. To me, if there is not also a strong letter of censure included, my feeling is that we are putting a very small piece of plaster on a large problem which there is a high risk will reoccur in a short time.
So you're proposing a change to the motion, I guess, to add the words, or to add a number 9, or a number 9?
Well, I would say that it became the number 7. It needs to be prior to any reference to the removing of responsibilities. In my mind, council needs to, having voted against the asking the mayor to consider resigning, I still believe that council should consider, and that there should be a motion, and I'm prepared to put it forward, that there be a letter of censure from this council to the mayor, a serious letter of censure for the behaviour that took place.
Okay.
Then you can talk about the penalties that are now in step 7 and step 8. But if there's not a letter of censure, to my mind, we have not come to a complete resolution.
So just to be, then you would make number 7 in that council sends a letter of censure to the mayor. Then number 7 becomes number 8, and number 8 becomes number 9.
Yes.
Well, I've moved it, so I'm comfortable to add those words as a mover. So did we? Trish, would you be
I'm happy to support the addition to that.
Okay.
I second it.
So number 7 becomes that council resolves to send a letter of censure to the mayor. We can talk after we've about how just what the process would be for, having that letter of censure drafted and approved before it was sent.
My suggestion would be that we engage the investigator to assist with that letter being written. I don't believe it would be appropriate for it to be done by any member at this table or by any member of the staff. I think it needs to be done by the independent investigator who is most aware and is obviously listening today, but is certainly most aware because they have done the investigation of why we would be taking that serious step.
So could I maybe just ask officers, Michael or Cameron, whether that would be the appropriate approach to this if a letter of censure was to be written, and taking Councillor Soper's point that it should not be written by any of us, but it should be written by somebody who's familiar with the case but at the same time independent, that could perhaps be the lawyer who undertook the... But I mean, my question really is, who is the best place to write that letter? I don't know if there's any precedent to that.
Through yourself, Chair, given the nature of this particular complaint, I'm going to have to hand that over to either Bruce, the Independent Risk Chair, or to Andrew Cameron, because I'm not the coordinator of this particular process, so I have to hand this across.
So, Councillor Soper, would you be comfortable that we don't, work that through to but that Andrew Cameron and Bruce Robertson work together to decide how that should be done.
I would be comfortable with
Yeah.
that.
Okay, thank
But
you.
I do make the point that I am firmly of the belief that it cannot be a member of our own staff.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Okay, Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I accept that we have failed the vote to call for his resignation and that this is the subsequent motion. But the fact that this is the subsequent motion doesn't matter whether or not you are yes or you are no for his resignation. The fact that this admission to the fact that this entire room understands that there is a medical issue here is a direct reflection of the fact that we all recognise that he cannot fulfil the duties. Like, it's so hypocritical and contradictory. If not this, like, I honestly think that if not resignation, I honestly believe that we should be requesting a leave of absence. That you
Well,
can
if that motion fails, then obviously we can come back to, you know, that or Ria's suggestion is a different motion. Okay, so if nobody else has got their hand up, then I will put that motion. Trish, you have already seconded it. It's going through a couple of changes. Are you still happy to
Yes, I am.
second it? So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, put their hand up. 7, 8. Those opposed?
Can I have it noted, please?
Rangi too, so Ria and Rangi. Okay, so the motion is carried. Do we have any further business today? Okay, so we're still wordsmithing the final resolutions. Okay, so we have not moved resolutions 1, 2, 3 and 5. Will someone move those?
I'll move those.
Thank you, Councillor Soper. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Barry. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Me,
Okay.
noted, please.
Okay, so Ria, I don't think Rangi is. So Ria, pardon? And Ian.
Point of clarification,
Yeah.
You moved 7 and 8. Did you move 9? Because we have not had a chance to speak to 9. I do not believe.
9 was the one where we,
The letter of apology.
yes. Okay, you're right, it's not quite finished, they've not typed it up yet. But I think the 9 was that council also requests the mayor to make a formal apology to Ms X, and I think it was suggested, and to the city. What's your?
I can't move, Mr. Chair. As
No,
you
I'm
know,
just trying to
but-
wordsmith.
But I would suggest that as well as a formal apology to Ms X, which needs not to make excuses, I think, to be genuine, that he also apologises to the councillors, staff and citizens of Invercargill for bringing them into disrepute.
So we did verbally say that, but can I just ask whether anyone who approved it previously would object to those words?
I'll move it formally as an addition to
Okay, okay,
motion 9.
right, and I'll second it. So, is there any other discussion? Well, let's wordsmith it first.
Can
so
we
that
wordsmith it first, please?
Council also request. I think that looks right, doesn't it? Councillor Soper.
Do we need to say for,
A formal apology in writing to Miss X.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's the most
Yeah.
appropriate.
that's what,
Okay, so,
That also implies that the apology to councillors, staff and citizens would be in writing, and one would expect it to be a media release.
to be publicly released. Well, look, we don't need
Yes.
that. I mean, just a formal public apology in writing probably is the word. That's-
Just think for the purposes of a acceptable apology to Miss X, I think it needs to be clear it's in writing for her.
thank you.
Councillor
Okay.
Soper, is that better?
Council also request here. Okay, so Leslie, so
Excuse me?
are you happy with that, to move that with those words? And I will. Alex has seconded it. I
No,
think.
I'd like to speak to it as well, sorry.
Okay.
I would second it if it was amended. I believe that this apology would be most acceptable delivered in the forum that the grievance happened in the first instance, which was publicly in front of an audience. I believe he needs to say, he needs to read his written statement, the letter, in an open meeting.
Followed by public crucifixion, perhaps, or something like that. No, well, yeah, I mean,
Excuse me?
you can move. I mean, that. Look, see, you're expecting him
Yeah,
to.
point of order, no public crucifixion. An apology is an apology. Do we not all believe that there's a serious material breach of our code of conduct? It deserves an apology.
But we have just said that. But to suggest that he's got to do it in the place where it was in front of an audience, presumably an invited audience, to.
Sorry,
I
sorry.
think that Councillor Crackett is suggesting that the public apology be read out at the beginning of the next council meeting.
That is exactly what I'm suggesting.
Which would be
It's just-
appropriate,
it just
and
needs to
I'm
come-
sorry that
yeah.
I didn't suggest that, Councillor Crackett, but it would be appropriate. It would be very much in keeping with both local body and central government apologies.
Sorry, Sorry, Chair, I wasn't actually insinuating we get all the volunteers and the firefighters back in the room to go through a second ordeal.
So we will add those words. Okay. I'll leave it to council at the next council meeting. Okay, so we've still got a mover. I'm still the seconder. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And I think it was unanimous, or did Councillor Pottinger vote against?
I think I've given up the will till then.
Okay. So I think we have concluded, haven't we? Is there anything else we need to do? Okay, well in that case, I will close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.